Hello, everyone. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. So I just wanted to take some time for if you guys want to go over these different FRQs. So I basically, in this video, will be going through just a refresher on what each FRQ prompt was, go through the rubric, and then go through an exemplar response just to kind of highlight some of the things that I think AP will really be looking for in these FRQ responses, especially now that it's really application based. Again, AP is having this be an open note exam, so they don't care if you can define something because any old person can go on Google and look up the definition. So they're really more than ever going to be looking to see if you guys can apply these terms to different scenarios. So I'm going to try and go through some of the different applications people had. Did a really good job of kind of demonstrating their knowledge by applying it to a situation. So let me real quick, I'll get started by just refreshing what this prompt was. So I'll start with FRQ option 1 and then go to 2 and to 3. So if you don't care about 1, you can fast forward to whatever FRQ you had. So question 1, we had Max's training to run a marathon in the fall. So we first described how these different theories of emotion or of motivation would explain his behavior of doing the marathon. And then we had how the following terms could help or hurt him in accomplishing his goal of running the marathon, how he might encounter the following conflict of avoidance during his training, then how the Shachter two-factor theory of emotion would explain his emotional response on the day of the race. So let's get started here. So I'll read through the rubric really quick. So for arousal theory, big thing here is that we are motivated to do something in order to reach our preferred or optimal level of arousal. And this is unique to each person. We all have different levels of arousal that we need to satisfy. And you could also talk about it kind of in relation to the Yerkes-Dodson law of how physiological arousal impacts our performance. So here, if you do the whole motivation impacts arousal thing, you could talk about how Max might be motivated to do the marathon because this is something that keeps him from boredom and is in his optimal level of arousal. If you're doing it more the Yerkes-Dodson way, you could talk about how being in that just right or moderate level of arousal would help him have his best performance because you don't want to be too chill or too stressed with a high level of arousal. Okay, so then incentive theory. Big thing here, we need to talk about how behavior is motivated by rewards or reinforcements. And if you talk about intrinsic or extrinsic motivation here too, that's like bonus points. That would really impress a AP reader. So here, an example, Max is motivated by getting a medal for participating in the marathon. So you need to give an example of a reward. You can't just say, Max gets a reward for the marathon. You need to show that you know what a reward or reinforcement is. So say getting a medal, getting a sticker, getting, I don't know, free swag, whatever. And we have big 5 trait of conscientiousness. So here we have, you could say that listing those key terms, right? So you need to talk about organization, discipline, diligence, reliability, responsibility. So any of those things need to be, not all of these, but a couple at least in your definition. You need to show how these would apply. So it's not enough to just say that, okay, yeah, being conscientious is a good thing. It helped Max in his marathon. You need to give an actual, example of how he'd use this. So be specific here. So Max uses conscientiousness to make very organized and regimented training schedules. So this is specific. You're not just saying it's good for him, you're saying why and how he would use this trait. Over-justification effect. So main thing here, this is when something that was originally intrinsic, so you enjoy doing this activity for fun, you get a reward for doing it now, and this actually ruins your intrinsic motivation to do it. So let's say that you had something like reading. That's a good example. As a kid, you like to read, and then you had intrinsic motivation, but then you go to school and they start giving you rewards, like candy or something if you read, and now that's going to take away your original intrinsic motivation, so you're going to find less enjoyment, and you're not going to want to do it for fun as often. So here the big thing, you need to talk about how something that was originally intrinsically motivating is now getting rewarded, so you enjoy doing it less for intrinsic enjoyment. So here he gets a medal now for participating in the marathon, and this could cause him to lose intrinsic enjoyment and love of running. And then we have avoidance conflict. So you need to talk about how there's two things you have to decide between, and both are negative or unpleasant. So be specific. You can't just say Max has to decide between two things he doesn't want to do. You need to give examples, specific examples here. So Max has to decide between doing 20 lunges or run in the rain. Both of these are things he doesn't want to do. And then we have Schachter two-factor theory of emotion. So for this one, you need to talk about the two important things here of physiological arousal and cognitive labeling. So you can't score without talking about those, but you also need to show that you know what these mean. So you can't just say, oh, Max had physiological arousal and cognitive label. You need to give an example of this, because you could just say that and we wouldn't know that you understand what those terms mean. So for example, the race was a stimulus and he begins to feel his heart racing, right, and getting sweaty. So that's the physiological arousal. You showed what you mean, what those mean. And then this causes him to think and cognitively label this as I'm nervous and scared. And this results in him experiencing fear. So that's the emotion. So you showed that you understand what it means. Alright, so now let's break it down to an exemplar FRQ, so one that did a really good job. So I bolded the terms just so you can easily see, but that's not a bad idea actually to do on the actual AP exam, and we don't have a lot of time, but that could be something nice for the reader to see each term. So just kind of general things from looking at it before I even start reading it. Look, they're underlining their key terms. That's awesome. They're putting space between it still to make it really easy for the reader to read. All these things are nice, right? While they're not required, they definitely get some bonus points in the eyes of a reader. So remember, when we do FRQs, we want to do DEA format. Define, general example, and apply it to the scenario that we have in the prompt. So general example probably is the least important thing out of all those three. It's something that's helpful if you might be struggling to apply it. If you have a good general example and show that you understand it with that way, that might still help you a little bit. But if you're running low on time, the general example could be something that you might scrap at some point. So here, arousal theory says that people are motivated to meet their own optimal level of arousal that they need to reach in order to avoid boredom. So good definition, underline key terms. Each person has their own unique level of arousal. For example, someone might be happy completing a puzzle, while someone else might need to go skydiving to satisfy their optimum arousal level. Each person's different. Max might be motivated to run a marathon because he's participating in a marathon is what satisfies his optimum level of arousal and keeps him from experiencing boredom. So good application. They're underlining key terms and showing that they know what optimum level of arousal is. Incentive theory says that people are motivated by external rewards or incentives. Underline those key terms. For example, a person might be motivated to do well in school to get on the honor roll. Incentive theory would say Max is motivated to do the marathon because of rewards like a medal or putting a sticker on his car. And then bonus points, they labeled this correctly as extrinsic motivation. Here, right, you don't want to just say Max is motivated by rewards because that's too simple and you're not showing that you know what this means. So you need to give a real example of how you'd use this. So you could get like a medal or a sticker. That's a reward. All right. And we got conscientiousness is one of the big 5 traits of emotion that looks at how reliable, dependable, and organized a person is. Someone who is conscientious would be grounded, committed, and accountable. Haha. Scoring high in conscientiousness would help Max make really organized workout plans and stick to his exercise routine daily. So again, they're not just saying, conscientiousness is good, it'll help him. They're being specific in how it would help him. So, right? Organized workout plans, like a regimented routine. They're giving examples. Over-justification effect is when your original intrinsic motivation for an activity is ruined because you started getting extrinsic rewards for it. For example, a lot of kids have intrinsic motivation to read, but then they go to school and get rewards for reading, and they don't like to do it for fun anymore. Max might lose his original love of reading because of getting a medal, which is a reward, and that he might get for finishing the marathon. Right, so they talked about how the reward, and they showed what it meant. They gave an example of a medal, might cause him to lose his love of running, so they understand what intrinsic motivation is. Avoidance is a conflict where you have to choose between 2 undesirable choices. For example, you don't want to take out the trash or do the dishes, but you still have to choose one. Max might have to decide between running in the cold or having to do painful conditioning inside. Both sound bad to him. Right, so they're not just saying, oh yeah, there's 2 bad things he doesn't want to do. They're being specific and giving an example related to the situation of running in the cold or doing painful conditioning. And they clearly say, showing their knowledge, they're both bad. Factor 2 factor says that we experience emotion in 2 parts. You have physiological arousal and a cognitive label of it. For example, if someone saw a snake, they would experience physiological arousal like an increased heart rate. Then they cognitively label it as feeling scared and therefore experience the fear emotion. Max notices his heart is beating really fast, so he cognitively interprets it as being scared. Right, so the big thing here is they say physiological arousal and cognitive label. You need both of those to get credit, but they explain that they know what it is, right? Because physiological arousal is kind of a weird term, something that's new to us. So you want to show AP that you understand what this is. So they showed heart's beating really fast, boom, physiological arousal, and then cognitively interprets it. So, as I'm scared, or here they're saying feeling scared, right? So that's how you feel and how you interpret it. Good, good, good. Okay. Reader. Okay, so next one here, we had Penelope preparing for her senior vocal recital this spring where she gets to perform a solo in front of the entire school. So you're talking about how these terms would either help or hurt her, and then how the avoidance conflict might show up, how these terms could help her during the performance, and then how factor 2 factor might describe the emotional reaction she has during that performance. Okay, so here for internal locus of control, to score that point, you need to explain the positive effect having an internal locus of control over situations would have. So again, internal locus of control is a good thing. So you're describing how this would help her. So how would feeling in control of your life benefit her? For an example, Penelope feels in control of her success and knows that if she practices hard, she will have a good performance. This motivates her to practice more. Then over-justification effect. So this example, you need to talk about a situation in which some kind of external reinforcement or reward ruins your kind of intrinsic enjoyment in an activity or behavior. So remember, it's giving a reward it ruins that original interest that you had in doing something for fun. So we talked about reading as a good example of that. Little kids like to read, you go to school, then they give you a reward for it, and now you don't like to read for fun as much. So here, getting praise from her parents or teachers or getting applause from the audience could result in Penelope losing intrinsic enjoyment and her love of singing. So avoidance, conflict. So again, be specific here. Don't be general in what the two unpleasant things are that you're deciding between. So if you're saying, oh, there's two things that Penelope really does want to do when she's practicing, that's not going to score because AP really cares about the application now that we're all FRQ based and open note. So be specific in your example. So Penelope has to decide between practicing scales or playing the hard part of her solo. Both are things that are unpleasant that she doesn't want to do. Yerkes-Dodson law, so this is part of that optimal arousal theory. So you need to talk about the relationship between how level of arousal, so like how stressed or chill you are, impacts the quality of your performance. So remember that's that inverted U is the Yerkes-Dodson law. So it says basically that we perform best at a moderate level of arousal. If it's too high, we're going to be stressed out and choke. If it's too low, it's going to be too low stakes and too chill. Other little bit of Yerkes-Dodson law is that low levels of arousal are best for learning new or complex tasks because it's low stakes, so you can kind of practice and not feel scared. And then high levels of arousal are better for like an easier task that you're confident in doing. Again, the sweet spot for this would be moderate level of arousal where it's not too chill or too hard or stressful. So here, according to Yerkes-Dodson law, Penelope would perform best under conditions of moderate arousal. If there's too much pressure, she'll become stressed or choke. If it's too chill or low stakes, she might not give her best performance either. So again, you need to talk about the relationship between level of arousal and performance here. Self-efficacy. So again, this is all about her belief and her ability. So keyword here that you need to indicate is that it's her, if she like believes in her abilities or her skills here. So you're talking about her musical skills, obviously here. So if she has high self-efficacy, it'll help her. She'll feel that belief in herself and confidence going on stage. But if she has low self-efficacy, you can say that it would hinder her then because she won't believe in herself when she gets on that stage. Chapter 2, Factor Theory of Emotion. So this is, again, you need to talk about the two parts of this. So you have the physiological arousal and the cognitive label. So you can establish the physiological arousal by talking about things like heart racing or getting sweaty, because physiological arousal is something that you can't help. It's kind of involuntary bodily response, like sweating or heart racing, breathing really heavy. So you need to indicate that somehow by saying physiological arousal and giving that example of like heart racing, sweaty palms, whatever. And then you need to talk about the second thing, which is the cognitive label. So taking, you notice that your heart's racing, and now you're going to label what that means. So you might say, in her example, she was happy. So she's labeling as I'm excited and pumped, and then this results in the overall emotion of excitement and happiness. So internal locus of control here's this is our next exemplar FRQ. So again, I went through this person didn't have their stuff underlined, but I underlined it just to kind of show again what a good response would be when it comes to underlining key terms. And again, also noting good things they're doing is leaving space, right? Even though it's online, the readers like to have space between the different terms. So here, internal locus of control is the belief that you control your own destiny. You have control of your success. For example, a person with an internal locus of control would attribute their A on a test to their hard work. So again, you have definition, general example to help kind of show your understanding, and then now we have the application. So if Penelope has an internal locus of control, this would help her because she thinks she's in control of how she does on her recital if she works hard. So she keeps practicing because she knows it'll pay off. So again, strong application. They're showing clearly that they understand what this means and how it will help her in this situation. So again, you need to talk about how being in control of your life and the outcomes can help her, and they clearly did that here. So over-justification effect is when you give a reward for doing something they already enjoy, intrinsic motivation, but then this makes them actually enjoy it less. So they have good definition, underline key terms. For example, a person might enjoy reading for fun, but then their teacher gives them candy when they read and makes them like reading less, so they showed their understanding with the general example. And now application, Penelope might have loved to sing, so that was intrinsic, but now the reward she gets from the attention from her recital causes her to not enjoy singing as much. So again, they're giving that example of how something that was once intrinsic, loving to sing, is the reward, that external motivator, and now it causes her to lose her intrinsic motivation. All right, so they put a nice space here, and we have avoidance conflicts when someone has to choose between two undesirable choices. For example, a person has to decide between doing laundry or taking out the garbage, and they don't want to do either. Penelope might have to decide between practicing at school, where people might hear her, and that's bad, or at home where her siblings might annoy her, so that's bad as well. So again, examples or their applications very strong. They're clearly showing two specific things that are both unpleasant, and they're labeling it as that. So the Yerkes-Dodson law states that people perform their best under conditions of moderate arousal. If there's too much or too little arousal, it might not be good. For example, a person at a basketball game wants to have a little stress to play their best, but not too much. Penelope might not do well if she's too stressed or has too much pressure. It would help her to have only a moderate level of stress or arousal during the concert. So again, underlining those key terms, showing that they can apply their definition. Self-efficacy is a person's belief in their own abilities or skills in a given situation. For example, someone with high self-efficacy would be confident in their skills and abilities. Having strong self-efficacy would help Penelope believe in herself and her music skills, and would help her be confident when she's on stage. So here is your belief in yourself. So it's not just confidence, it's the fact that you actually believe in your abilities that you have. So just having confidence wouldn't score, but you have to talk about your belief in your abilities and skills. And then Schacter 2-factor says that we experience emotions. We have a physical arousal and a cognitive label to it. For example, if I saw a spider, my heart rate would increase and I would label it as being scared. Penelope's heart is racing, so that's her physiological arousal, and she interprets it as being excited for the big day. So again, they clearly demonstrated that they know what physiological arousal is, and they know what cognitive labeling is. And again, I'm going to emphasize enough, make sure that you guys are practicing your application. So doing that third column in your notes and coming up with different examples in real life to show that you can apply these to different situations, because that's what AP only cares about now, especially since they're open note exams. All right. So FRQ version 3 at 130. So this one says, Jackie's been working really hard at studying for her AP psychology exam in the spring. So we were describing how this theory of emotion, incentive theory, explain how this theory of motivation would explain her behavior. And then we have describe how the following terms would either help or hurt her in getting ready for the exam. And then we have how would she encounter the approach avoidance conflict during her studying. And then how would the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion explain her emotional response as she's taking the exam? So rubric here. So incentive theory. Big thing you need to do here is say that behavior is motivated by receiving external rewards or reinforcements. So you need to give an example of a reward or reinforcement for Jackie. So here, Jackie's motivated by getting a 5 on her AP exam and getting college credit. And then this isn't required, but this is a good example. This is an extrinsic motivator as opposed to something that's intrinsic that you like to do for fun. So external locus of control, to score this point, you have to explain that this would be something that's negative because you feel like you don't have control over situations in your life. So looking here, you need to say there's a lack of control over your life. You feel like things are out of your control. So you need to talk about how this would negatively impact Jackie. So for example, Jackie feels like her success is out of her control. She thinks how she does is up to luck. So she does not see the need to study if in the end it's ultimately out of her control. And then big 5 trait of conscientiousness. So big thing here is that you need to make sure you're using the key terms in this one, right? There's a whole bunch associated with it. Organization, discipline, diligence, responsibility. So you need to be talking about these key terms and showing how Jackie would use these. So it's not enough to just say, oh, she uses conscientiousness to do well on the exam. That's too little. You need to elaborate and give an example here. So here we have Jackie uses this to make very organized and regimented study schedules because, again, organized, disciplined. She's very self-motivated, right? So you need to give a real example of how this applies. And then over justification effect. So this here, you need to talk about how giving reinforcements, rewards or reinforcements to something that was originally intrinsic, so you enjoyed doing it for fun, how that would actually ruin your intrinsic motivation. So giving rewards to something ruins the intrinsic motivation that you once had. So you need to show this in an example. So for example, if her parents paid her to study, this might result in her losing the original intrinsic interest she had in learning about psychology. Maybe she was really intrinsically motivated and took the class because she wanted to learn more, but then getting paid for her studying would ruin her quest to want to learn more about psychology, her intrinsic interest. All right, avoidance, conflict. So here you need to talk about something that has, approach avoidance, conflict. You need to talk about something that has both positive and negative aspects to it. So it's one goal or one thing that has both positive and negative pros and cons. So main thing is you need to be specific. So you can't just say, oh, during her studying, Penelope has to decide between something good and bad. That's way too general. You need to give a real application and example. So, for example, Penelope has to decide if she wants to stay up late studying. This would help her learn more information, so positive, but this will also cause her to be tired for the next day, negative. So you need to come up with a real specific example. And then finally, Cannon-Barr theory of emotion. So to score this point, you need to talk about how in an emotional response, physiological arousal and emotion happen at the same time. So you need to be saying same time or else you're not going to get credit. You need to demonstrate that you understand what physiological arousal is and what an example of an emotion is. So here in your application, you can't just say, oh, Jackie experiences physiological arousal and emotion at the same time. You need to give an example of that. So as she receives her test of stimulus, Jackie's palms feel sweaty and her heart starts racing. So there you go, you demonstrated your knowledge of physiological arousal. And at the same time, she feels scared. So now you demonstrated your knowledge of an emotional response. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go to our exemplar response. So this person, I bolded the terms just so it's easier for us, but that's something nice that you could probably even do if you have the time during your FRQ. I know we don't have a whole lot of time on this, so understandable. And I like this because they're underlining different key terms and showing how to do that in an online setting. So let's start. Incentive theory states that people are motivated by the incentives or rewards they get for their behavior. For example, someone might be motivated to work hard at their sport because they want a college scholarship, so extrinsic motivation. Jackie could be studying for her AP exam because she wants the reward of college credit or to save money when she goes to college. Right? Really great specific application. And application's what AP is looking for here because AP exams all open note. They don't care if you can define it because anyone can go ahead and define something. They want to see that you can apply it and show your knowledge. And part of that, I think, is underlining those key terms, right? So that's going to show them and set you apart from the rest, show them that you really understand this topic and these terms by picking out the key things that are connected to them. So I think especially in this exam year, with all the craziness and it being really application based, that will actually be really good for them. So here you see they got the definition, general example to show their understanding, and then application. And here, again, you can even put a double space to kind of make it nice for the reader to read. So external locus of control is when people feel like external things control them and they are not in control of their own lives. For example, if someone with external locus of control failed their math test, they would blame it on bad luck and not what they put into it. This won't help her because she probably won't study that hard if she knows that it's only up to luck or fate. So again, here they're explaining specifically using the key terms how this would impact Jackie. You don't need that much, right? You don't need to write a novel, but they're getting to the point and showing that luck and fate, they have those key terms in there to demonstrate that they know what this term means. So big five trait of conscientiousness is how reliable and dependable someone is. For example, someone who scores low on conscientiousness is unreliable and unorganized and would be a bad partner. If Jackie scored high on conscientiousness, she would study every day and follow through on it. This would help her be prepared for the exam. And you can even elaborate more, maybe list some of those words associated, like, oh, she'd be really organized, she'd be very diligent, but they do a good job of kind of giving an example of how she'd use this trait, not just saying it helped her, but like, oh, she'd use it being very organized in her studying and doing it every day and maybe making like a schedule or something. All right. Over-justification effect is when a person gets rewarded for doing something that was originally intrinsically motivating for them. It causes them to lose interest in it in the end. For example, if someone liked to play soccer for fun, but then their parents start rewarding them, they might lose enjoyment. This could hurt Jackie because her parents start giving her rewards like candy or money for studying. She could lose interest in the studying she had originally. Right, so maybe she would lose her original interest in psychology because she's getting rewarded for it with the AP exam. All right, approach avoidance is a conflict where someone has to make a choice about whether to pursue a single goal that has both attractive and unattractive aspects. For example, you get into your dream school, but you have to pay a bunch of money. So there's pros and cons there. If Jackie spends a lot of time studying, she might get a 5, but she also might miss out on hanging out with her friends. So you can even wrap it up in the end by saying this is a positive and a negative thing. But they do a good job of giving a specific example. So not just saying, oh, she might come across something that's good and bad. They're saying, okay, here's the example. She could get a 5, good. Or she might miss hanging out with friends, bad. And then Cannon-Barth theory of emotions, when someone experiences the physiological arousal and emotion at the same time. For example, if someone saw a snake, they would get sweaty and have their heart beat faster, and they also at the same time would feel the emotion of fear. For Jackie, she might get to this exam and start feeling her heart race and also feel fear at the same time because it's all happening so fast, right? So I would even underline same time, right? Because that's very important. that physiological arousal and emotion are at the same time. And she demonstrates that she knows what physiological arousal is because she says heart racing, right? Gives an example. And then emotion, you have the fear. So you're giving real specific examples to show that you understand what this means. If you were just to say, oh, she experiences physiological arousal and emotion, an AP reader wouldn't know that you understand what those words mean. So again, good idea to keep underlining those key terms. Obviously, if you don't feel confident on the word, maybe not. But if you feel confident and you got it, go ahead and underline those key terms because that's going to really impress a reader in this format of the exam. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, you guys. If you want to make revisions, again, you can just go through and the ones that you got marked wrong on, you can do rewrites for. Don't copy these examples, right? I'll know if you do, so that wouldn't get you points, but come up with your own different example. All right, thank you guys.